What's up, everybody, and welcome to the PlayStation Lifestyle Community Podcast, where PlayStation Lifestyle Forum members come to talk about all things PlayStation. I'm Steve Bitto. I'm the community manager for PlayStation Lifestyle, and I'm with a couple of members from the forums. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Absolutely. I am Hugo Stiglitz, and we are also with. Introduce yourself, Brian.
I'm Brian Mashala. Brian Mashala, CloudStripe768 as my forum handle and PSN handle.
All right, awesome. And today we're going to be talking about, with the launch of Bloodborne and a developer kind of following their vision, coming out with a niche game, but really unforgiving type game. With sales be damned. We're looking at the trade-off between following your creative vision, even if it may cost you sales, or adjusting your vision for the mass market and going for the average gamer, if you will. Personally, I'm kind of against that because I have a personal experience with that. And that franchise was SOCOM. SOCOM 1, 2, 3 on PS2 were very tough, extremely difficult learning curve. But on PlayStation 3, when they gave it back to Zipper on SOCOM 4, they kind of dumbed it down quite a bit, and they really lost connection with that really hardcore audience, which is what made the game like so special. And as we all know, Zipper ended up closing because the game did so poorly. Although that was kind of also because of the PlayStation hack. Part of it was because the game lost its spirit, like it lost what made it SOCOM. And so I'm kind of against it, but I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
I have some examples of where, for me personally, it went right. Where going for the mass market appeal actually ended up making a game that I enjoyed more. But as far as an example where it goes wrong, for me, it's got to be Assassin's Creed. I loved Assassin's Creed when I first played it. I actually didn't play it till about 2012, around when Assassin's Creed 3 came out. I played them all in a row, the whole entire series, just like you're binge watching Breaking Bad or something. And that's a good comparison because it used to be that type of series where each game was directly connected to the next. The overall meta story to it was very much important. The whole modern day story with Desmond was huge, and they just completely did a 180 with Assassin's Creed 4, and even worse with Unity, and almost completely scrapped the modern day story. Like, it's pretty much an afterthought now, and that just killed it for me. Like, the series had a real direction at first. From the first game, they really made it seem like they were going to bring it to a modern day Assassin's Creed, and I loved the idea, and I just loved the whole overall story about the really ancient, like, godlike characters, and the first human civilization, and they just kind of abandoned that to, oh yeah, let's just make random guys in history so you can go around and stab people, which completely is more what the casuals and the mass market appeal want. And for me, it just killed the series. Like, I'm done with the series, and it's like when I finished playing Assassin's Creed 3, it was probably my favorite game series ever, and that just completely changed. So it can go both ways, but Brian, do you have an example?
I haven't played this series, but It's hard to be a gamer It's hard to be a gamer in general and not know about it, and that's Resident Evil, where arguably the first 2, 3 games were adventure games, just barely more than point and click with a little bit of action tossed in. And I played a little bit of Resident Evil 4 and 5. I was never big in the series, but I knew that the series changed dramatically and still is and has been. You have the most recent numbered entry, which was Resident Evil 6, which was a apparently huge commercial success, but almost universally critically and publicly hated on by just about everyone because, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why, but it from what I've gathered from the outside looking in, it seems like they've completely changed what the series was about, even going beyond the adventure aspects, but just shifting focus into a more shooter focused game. Um, I mean, that's why you have the ability to do spin-offs, but I just always felt like, when you stick to a numbered entry of a series, you kind of want to leave it alone and not do anything. I guess with Assassin's Creed, since they called it Unity and not 5, maybe they could do different things. This again with 4, it was Black Flag, so maybe they wanted to change things up, but I don't know.
Yeah,
Spin-offs, sure. Direct
mhm.
main entries, no. Leave it what you're trying to do. Don't force something that's not.
Well, the thing is with the non-numbered games in Assassin's Creed, they still were direct sequels. Like you had Brotherhood and Revelations, but they were like absolutely direct sequels to the rest of the series. I think maybe the reason they didn't just make them 3 and 4, it was just because they were sticking with Ezio instead of. I think maybe the number thing is just when they changed Assassins, but as far as the overall story and the overall series, they were even more directly related to the ones before them than 4 is to 3. Like, really the only link between 3 and 4 is the relationship between Edward Kenway and, I can't even remember his name from 3.
Connor.
Oh, well. But I'm glad you mentioned Resident Evil because that is one of, my examples of a series that did change, did go for more mass market appeal, but ended up appealing to me a lot more. At least for 4, I can't speak on 5 or 6 because I never played them, but 4 I loved. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I never really liked the rest of the series. Like I tried 2, I think I've tried 1, when I was younger, and I just hated them. Like I tried 2 again after I completed 4, just because my friends told me it's better this and that, and no, I just couldn't get into it, and I was actually like glad that they went in that direction. But then as you say, I think pretty obviously they took it way too far because they're pretty much, like you said, it's pretty much universally panned. 5 and 6, I mean, so it's too bad that they took it a little too far. I think it's because they saw the success of 4 and then thought that they should go even further with it. But really, they should have just tried to make an even better Resident Evil game again, more like 4 than going even further into the casual shooter territory, I guess. Dead Space is another example. I mean, 3 definitely went away from the whole survival horror genre and then just kind of turned into this co-op third-person shooter type thing.
Yeah, I agree. I actually, going back to Resident Evil really quick, I actually went back and played 4 HD, and that was the first time I'd ever played a Resident Evil game, and I really enjoyed it a lot. Although I could definitely tell where it was a little more actiony than the previous ones had been, maybe a lot more actiony actually. But then I played 5, and I really did not like 5 whatsoever. I thought it wasn't scary at all. Like there was no fear, there was no anything. It was just an action third-person shooter. And the reason why I hated it was because, they try to keep some of the clunky controls, which kind of gives you that frantic feel. But in an action game, that doesn't make any sense. That's poor controls for an action game.
Yeah, like I think the clunky controls actually kind of worked for Resident Evil 4 because, like you said, it did kind of intensify the action by being that way, but I definitely agree with you as far as 5 because it was a much more like action-oriented game, but it still kind of didn't have the best controls. So
yeah, when everything else is like cutting around. Wait, Brian, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say it kind of adds to the problem because you mentioned 4. 4 is universally loved by a lot of fans of the series. Again, I'm talking from the outside looking in and just knowing and reading and seeing and hearing, but a lot of people love 4, and a lot of people from what I've seen tend to think that 5 was losing its way and 6 just a lot of people disliked it. The problem with that is the sales numbers were getting higher and higher as the game got more and more casual or more and more actiony and more accessible. It's not many people like adventure games, but the entirety of the last generation was defined by the shooter, be it first or third person, so adding more shooter mechanics would almost guarantee that you made more money as a result of that, which, not to say anything about Capcom, but would probably be more appealing since Mega Man was dead and a lot of their Onimusha was dead, and a lot of their franchises just hasn't been selling as well.
Do either of you guys have any examples of a series that went a little more casual, but you actually ended up liking it more, or is it just me? Because I do have a couple other series that like Killzone and to a lesser extent Resistance. But do you guys have any other examples of how it can actually be a good thing?
I can almost say Bloodborne, just because like I already from the very beginning I felt like I was moving a lot quicker than I did the first time I played Demon Souls, because Demon Souls I think was actually offered for free with PlayStation Plus like a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
And yeah, and I tried it, played like the first little bit, and it was like I felt like it was impossible. Like I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was moving so slow and clunky. Like I was like, I'm never gonna be able to like get by like 3 or 4 of these enemies,
I actually found the combat of Demon Souls easier. Well, I didn't play it as much as I have Bloodborne, but for the time I did play it, when I started with Bloodborne, I thought it was considerably harder. But what is a little more casual about Bloodborne is, you're not weighed down by how much equipment you carry, which I'm really thankful for. Like, because, you can have your entire inventory. Like, you don't have, like, you have a storage thing at your, the Hunter's Dream. You don't actually have to use it because other than, like, stuff that like if you have too many blood vials or the bullets, like, but as far as, like, weapons and stuff, you can carry all of it and you're never hampered by it. Like, you're not weighed down at all, that is a little more casual in a way, and I like that. So I think Bloodborne in that way is an example of a series that went a little more casual, but ended up being better for it. But as far as sorry, I just lost my track of thought completely. Brain fart. All
That's
right.
All right.
Yeah, but like what I was saying
actually
was like,
completely agree.
yeah, it made it a little more accessible, I felt, for me, and maybe that's why it's kind of getting the huge success it is. But I think maybe what we're kind of getting at here is that there's a really fine balance between, making a game better and losing the spirit of the game that makes it what it is. Because, I mean, it's still a Souls game, and most people say, like, this is still very much a Souls game.
Yep.
I don't know how much Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, the both of you played. I tried to play Demon Souls when it first came out. I was intrigued. I actually really liked it. I put a good 10 hours into it. I think I only killed 4 or 5 bosses. I actually kind of liked the non-linearity of it versus the more linearity of Dark Souls. I tried to play Dark Souls. I don't know what it was. I didn't like it nearly as much. With Bloodborne, I picked it up. I was actually pretty excited about it. To me personally, regardless of mechanics, which Bloodborne changes quite a bit between the not being able to block and it being a little faster, which really doesn't affect too much, just it gives you the appearance of maybe a little more casual or simpler or something like that. But the thing that struck me the most and what I love the most about the game is setting. I appreciate and I like the fact that Dark Souls, Demon Souls are more medieval, but 19th century Victorian castle instantly sold. I loved it. I'm loving it. That's the number one thing that I'm loving about Bloodborne right now. And just even, forgetting mechanics and casual and how it seemingly seems easier, even though I don't know if
Um,
it's really all that easier versus the previous entries in the Soul series.
I'm actually a little bit the opposite. Like I actually kind of like the setting of Demon Souls a little more. With the dragons and you actually there was actually daylight at some point. Like the first level you go into, it's during the day. You're in a castle. I actually did kind of like the setting more, although I do love the setting of Bloodborne. But I would argue that the speed of Bloodborne might actually make it a little less casual because you can't block, so a lot of it is you have to learn the timing of the enemies, really, I think that is what makes it a little harder. At least when you're first like getting to know it. Like once you already know the enemies, yeah, I'd say yeah, it is probably easier. Once you already know how they attack you and stuff. But as far as like if you're trying to go against a boss, I think that Bloodborne can actually be harder just because you really have to time it right and not get hit because you're pretty much screwed anytime you do. And there's very little room for error against the bosses and stuff. So, although I didn't fight a lot of bosses in Demon Souls, but like my early impressions was that Bloodborne was harder actually. But yeah, I guess I could see it both ways. There is some elements that are definitely more casual, like I was saying with the inventory being, it doesn't slow you down. That is definitely a much more casual element that I'm very thankful for, though.
I'd argue that's more of a quality of life change than anything.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it sounds good on paper, but once you're in the game, and I don't know, especially in Demon Souls when I was nearing a boss, and not all levels have shortcuts to get to the bosses quicker, and you become encumbered or something like that. Even in Skyrim, that was a really annoying mechanic, or any Elder Scrolls game where you're just in the middle of somewhere and you pick up the one thing and that's it. You move a quarter of the speed, and I don't know. I guess you could argue that it's more casual, but even easy games like an Elder Scrolls game has it. It's just, I personally find it to be a quality of life thing that all games.
I totally agree.
Encumbering mechanics aren't good.
I totally agree because I mean it can be such a buzzkill when you have to. Oh wait, no, I gotta stop now and deal with my inventory. Like I started playing Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl on the PC recently, and I haven't played it in a little while. Part of that is because Bloodborne came out and some other stuff, but part of the reason was because it's like you said, if you go over your limit as far as your inventory, all of a sudden you only can sprint 2 feet, and then you can't sprint anymore unless you take an energy drink, and it just can be a buzzkill to have to stop in the middle of combat, or when you're near combat, like when you're just trying to explore to get rid of some stuff in your inventory, and it's like I have trouble making those choices, so I'm like, man, I don't want to get rid of this, but I kind of have to, and it's like I just think that whole mechanic can be a buzzkill, so I totally agree with you that it is like a better quality of life to have that not be a factor. But there are definitely a lot of people that would consider that more casual, and I don't care if that's casual. I'd rather be casual, at least in that sense. Hell, it's just more fun that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, it's really tough because I think it's such a case by case basis when we really sit back and look at it. I mean, games like Resident Evil and Dead Space like really did it wrong. I mean, they really did it wrong,
Hmm.
and like everyone across the board agrees. Basically, it seems like.
Hmm.
And then games like Bloodborne, they really did it right. They really just they listen to the fans. They listen to the people, and they really only did the things that people really wanted and the things that would really get more people in without alienating their fans.
Yeah, I think part of the problem can be that like you could have games that sell, and a lot of casual people will buy them, and then but also a lot of hardcore fans will buy them as well. Like Assassin's Creed is a good example, because with 4 and Unity, they definitely pissed off the hardcore fans like myself, but they're still selling fine because there is that huge portion of the market that are just casual fans that just want to go back in history and stab people. Um, So that is it is completely case by case basis because sometimes it can ruin a series. Well, I don't know if it ruined Resident Evil. At least critically it did. I think Resident Evil 6 still sold really well, although it is like you
Best
said,
selling
it
in the
completely
series.
panned. Same thing with Dead Space 3. I'm pretty sure they did sell pretty well, but you notice that they're not in a huge rush to make another one, and I think and I don't think that's definitely not because of the sales. I think just because they hear the outcry from the fans and they know that if they try to release another one, it might take a little while to win back the fans' trust before they'll buy another one, and I think that's they're realizing that, which is a good thing. I think it's important for publishers and developers to realize what the fans want, and I mean, if they had just paid a little more attention in the first place, maybe that wouldn't have happened with Resident Evil and Dead Space.
Yeah.
At
And
the same
really,
time, I'm sure they don't want to stagnate though, as well. Sorry
no,
for
no, no.
interrupting.
No, it's okay. I think looking at all these cases, I think it comes down to publishers. Where does the publisher have the most power, and when are they really making changes that they shouldn't be making? And I think really, if you look at all these cases, especially the ones we pointed out, like Capcom, EA, and with Dead Space and Resident Evil, or Sony and SOCOM, I feel like that's where they kind of made the push to use their franchise to get to the mass audience, mass market audience, and that's when it kind of backfired a little bit. I think it's publishers making decisions that really they shouldn't be making.
Yeah, I agree.
Or at
I
least
think
not making decisions for the wrong reasons.
oh for
I
sure,
think it
yeah.
depends on the developer as well. I mean, when you look at Resident Evil, it's no secret that with the Capcom internal studios, they have kind of been on the decline over the last, I don't even know how many years. I mean, they built their house on Mega Man and they killed that series. Their most popular developer, Inafune, left. The quality of their games had been decreasing. I mean, a lot of this is debatable and arguable, but it just an overall trend seems to be that Capcom was on the decline. EA, they got voted worst company in America a bunch of times. It's no secret that it's the place a lot of random little studios die. Most recently, like Maxis, part of Maxis just shut down because SimCity launch was terrible, I'm assuming. So, places like that, it's as us, the consumers, not knowing the politics of developing and publishing and all that, kind of make these little connections. I know, I just thinking about games that changed dramatically. Off the top of my head, I could think of Jak and Daxter. Between 1 and 2 was a pretty big departure. I mean, it was similar mechanically, but with the inclusion of shooting and more adventure-y, open world, almost Grand Theft Auto-like take on it, I felt. But I mean, it was made by Naughty Dog, who is a tremendously talented and popular publisher, and it's one of those, or developer rather, and it's one of those things where Sony probably said, you know what, do whatever you want, no matter what you do, I know you'll make us money and it'll be a good game. Which they probably did for The Last of Us, and look how that turned out.
Yeah, I love it when Sony does that.
And they do it more than anyone, I think.
I definitely do think so as well. It does seem like there are some times where they have try to do it the big bad publishers where they're trying to get the games to be a little more casual. Like SOCOM might have actually been one of those examples. I suppose Killzone could be one as well, but that actually definitely could have been the developer as well. Really the only big change between Killzone 2 and 3 was just the feel of the controls. Like, it wasn't as weighty. Like, it had this really heavy feel in Killzone 2, and then 3 made it a little lighter. Also, just the aim down the sights mechanic was a little different. Like, you know how most games you hold the button down to aim down the sights. Well, in Killzone 2, it was like toggle. It was also a weird button. It was like the L3. I don't know. So it wasn't like a huge, more casual change, but a lot of the more hardcore Killzone 2 fans do say it was, and I'm not sure I agree with that. But like that's actually one of my examples of a series that got supposedly a little more casual that I actually liked a lot more. But I'm not sure that that was a push from Sony, so that might be a bad example. But yeah, that's one of those examples where I actually am glad they went a little more casual, not too much, but I think they made the right changes.
I think that's more of a quality of life change. I mean, it's great if you want to have a unique and fun and different control scheme, but when you click L3 to aim down your sights versus last gen, it was L1 on a PlayStation controller almost for every game. I mean, it just makes sense. Why if you're a shooter, you're gonna buy the next shooter. So why would you make your control scheme completely different and throw people off versus just do what everyone else is doing? And it's not entirely a bad thing if all shooters control the same. It irritated me for the longest time that in a lot of JRPGs that came over to the West, that circle was X and X was circle, and those were switched because they're switched in Japan, and that translated in the control scheme, and that irritated me. So some people might argue, I mean, the weightiness maybe is more casual, but the controller thing, I think it's more quality of life than anything.
Definitely, and also, I mean, they've tightened up the controls. They've, reduced the input lag, and one of the other things that some of the, old Killzone 2 fans complain about is the fact that it has color now. Like Killzone 1 and 2 were almost like grayscale. Like they were just so, dark and dingy, and like just there was barely any colors at all. Like if there was, it was just like a little bit of red. Like now you go to Killzone Shadowfall, where if you're in Vecta City, it's like absolutely gorgeous, and like colors are everywhere. And personally, I love that. Like that was one of the things I didn't like about Killzone 2. But then some other people saying like, complain about that. I don't really see that as like, being more casual. But I think it definitely is more mass market appeal. But like you say, I think that's improving the quality of life, at least for me. I mean, it's not a horror game, so I don't see any need for it to be dark and completely devoid of color,
Well, I think, to that point, though, with Killzone, I think they did a really good job explaining it with the story as well.
Yeah. Like it's not like they just changed Helghan. Yeah, right. Exactly. They changed the setting, and, it's not like they just changed Helghan into this colorful place. They didn't do that. They just changed location and decided to make it as colorful as it really should be. I mean, like, even in Killzone 1, they didn't really have the technology to do it, but like Vecta was supposed to be this kind of paradise type place, so it wouldn't make, it does make sense for them to make it more colorful. So that's one of those complaints that I don't really understand, but some people do have it. Some people do swear by Killzone 2 being the best one. I completely disagree, and I'm actually looking forward to playing some tonight with all of you guys.
Right. Yeah, even the gameplay, really, like, they kind of explain that, too, because the characters in Shadowfall are a little more, they're supposed to be quicker on their feet, they're supposed to be a little bit tighter.
Yeah, you're one of the elite of the Vecta army, I guess you'd call it. I'm not sure if they call it the
you're
army,
not supposed to be lugging around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make sense, and it just from a practicality standpoint, it makes more sense, too, because it's just not as enjoyable. I personally don't think it was as enjoyable to play Killzone 2, because the input lag was a factor as well. Like they significantly reduced it with Shadowfall and even 3, but also just the weightiness of it was definitely different as well. It's and I just think it's just better the way it is, and it is more towards like the Call of Duty type thing. But if you ask a Call of Duty player what they think, they'll say that Killzone's completely different. So I wouldn't say it would go that far. Like it definitely doesn't go too far, which is so I think it's a good example of a series that supposedly made things a little more casual according to some, but really they just ended up improving it in my opinion, at least. there are examples of, that go both ways where, series were the worst for it, like we've mentioned. But it is totally case-by-case basis, as a lot of, topics that we can discuss in the gaming industry.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think it just completely varies on top of that between genres and certain types of games. I mean, I don't know how big you guys are into, for example, the Harvest Moon series. It's under a different name now, but they haven't really changed much over the years, but they've just been improving and making little subtle changes that improve the overall. Just makes the game more entertaining, and they have more processing power to work with, so they can add new things, and I think it's the better for it. You have games like Dynasty Warriors that don't change, but people like me buy them all the time anyways because we love that. Yeah, I mean that's how you have developers like Gust and CompileHard stay in business. I mean, we always get random quote-unquote crappy JRPGs from CompileHard, like the Hyperdementia series, but they sell. The Atelier series, they sell really well here as well, to the point where they keep localizing them, they keep putting them on Vita. I mean, if a game series is continually being put on Vita, it's gotta be selling well enough for them to keep doing it.
So I think it kind of also comes back to, when you're making a big change or you're going to go for the niche or whatever, it's really knowing your audience, because I feel like, from Dead Space 1 to 2, I mean, they did make it more actiony, but they kept enough of it the way Dead Space 1 was that people still loved it. Even the people that loved Dead Space 1 for what it was still were able to love Dead Space 2. But
Yeah.
the move to Dead Space 3, I felt like all those people that accepted Dead Space 2, that was too much. They did not like Dead Space 3, and there's a good chance they won't come back for a Dead Space 4.
For sure. Like, I actually like Dead Space 2 more than 1. But yeah, like you do say it's a little more actiony, which probably is true. But Dead Space 3 definitely took it too far, and I think it's a slippery slope for developers and publishers to, see, do we want to keep making the same game over and over again and appeal to the really hardcore fan base, or do we want to try to make it more mass appealing so that we can possibly sell a ton more, but risk alienating that hardcore fan base? And it's definitely a slippery slope, as far as a choice that they have to make. And I think the key to it all is just listening to the audience and seeing what parts of the game they love and what parts they're open to, new ideas with. And I think, with this day and age, like, there's so many different ways for the community and the developers to talk to each other. I think that hopefully it should start happening less often, where a series just makes a change that the community just hates. Like, because they have plenty of ways to talking to the community nowadays with Twitter, forums, and other stuff like that hopefully, they don't take those choices as lightly as it seems they have in the past. I mean, but part of that could be the publisher's fault, basically, and the publisher doesn't really care. They just want to make more money. So instead of, they don't, I don't think they really, it seems like that sometimes they don't put as much thought behind, that type of decision as the developer might or should, which is why we have,
I think their problem is they don't value that hardcore audience enough. They guarantee fan base that you're going to alienate, because without them, like for instance with an online game, without that hardcore group, the fan base, you just have this average group that they don't have headsets, they're not working as a team. So like for something like SOCOM, that destroys it. The whole point is like working as a cohesive team. It's a tactical shooter. You need everyone wanting to that game. So if you take that away, the actual online presence is ruined. The average people come in and they're not enjoying it. They're not seeing what the hype's all about. So then they leave. The hardcore people have left, and you're left with a franchise that has no following anymore.
Yeah.
It's it's a risk reward thing,
For sure.
for sure, and especially from the publisher. I mean, AAA games are so expensive to make these days that it makes. I mean, it's unfortunate what happened to SOCOM, but it makes sense that you have. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but for example, it makes more sense that they try to casualize the audience a little bit and sell 1.5 million copies versus 500,000 to the people who always played it. And it, Zipper had guarantees to Sony, who was publishing it at the time. And it's all about that risk reward. What kind of return do you want on or have on the money, and all that stuff. That's way too complicated and businesslike for me to care about. But I mean, it's hard. It's hard to. You have success stories like Mass Effect 1 to 2 being a pretty different game. You could argue that casualized the series insanely, but it's better for it, I think. Mass Effect 3 ending controversy aside, the jump from 1 to 2 was huge. Was a huge departure from the first series, but it made it a infinitely better game when you don't have to be bogged down by little statistics, and I'm sure a lot of people hated that, but it ended up being a much better game. I can't really play Mass Effect 1, but I keep going back and occasionally playing Mass Effect 2. So that kind of risk for that outcome doesn't happen as often, and unfortunately you have stuff like try to casualize SOCOM, it ends up selling less and Zipper closes.
That's actually a great example because I tried to go back and play Mass Effect 1 when it finally came to PS3, and it was almost unplayable. After playing 2 and 3, it was just such a hard, concept to wrap your mind around with it not working as smoothly and as fluidly as 2 and 3 did with their improvements.
It's the AAA space, and there's the amount of risk that AAA developers and publishers are willing to take is shrinking rapidly as game development costs get more and more outrageous. Look to the indies to really revolutionize stuff like that. Even
Right.
if you have the indie space is where we'll probably see the rebirth of SOCOM under a different name, but the same tactical squad-based shooter that was SOCOM is what we'll eventually get out of that space.
Yeah, much like I had another example of a game that was absolutely loved by the community and by the critics as well, but kind of just failed and went away, which is Wipeout. And that is, like you said, it is being reinvented in the indie market with I think it's actually being made by the same people who were in Studio Liverpool before it got closed down. And I think some of those people from that team, I forget the name of the game, but they're kind of making like a new Wipeout basically, but it's going to be indie this time. And it's like that's a great example of a game that was always, critically loved by the people who played it, but just never sold a ton. And Sony basically gave up on it and got rid of the Studio Liverpool, which was really unfortunate. I never got huge into it, but I always, really, really liked it and really appreciated it. I just never gave it the time that it probably deserved, but that's a good example of a game that, stuck with the hardcore fans and stuck to doing what they were at the best at, and, it didn't work out for them, unfortunately. But thanks, to PS4, Sony's strong support of the whole indie scene, we are going to see another Wipeout game in spirit on PS4. Just can't remember the name of it right now. But that is
it's kind of funny. The exact same example is a lot of the Zipper guys went and they're doing indie right now, and they're making a game called H Hour, which is basically a spiritual successor to SOCOM. And right now, that's about to go early access to Steam, and then it's supposed to come to PS4 shortly after that. But that's how they're realizing their vision is they're going to have to do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Mighty Number 9.
Okay, I just found the name.
I've been asking for
I just found the name
I'm
of
actually curious
the.
myself.
the game. It's called Formula Fusion. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just found the name of it.
That's alright. That sounds familiar. I do remember reading about that, and yeah, like I was saying, in Mighty Number 9, people have been asking for old school Mega Man games. Capcom killed Mega Man. Inafune left, and now he's making a Mega Man game. And I don't even remember how insanely successful it was on Kickstarter, but it's coming everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that is coming to PS4, Xbox, Nintendo,
Even
all
Vita,
the...
I think, right?
Oh, wow. Huh.
Mega number 9? Or not Mega number, Mighty number 9?
And Wii U, I think, and
Yep.
3DS.
Yeah, that's nice to see.
If it's coming to Vita and Wii U, it must have been successful on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Well, all right, guys. I think should we wrap it up?
Yeah, we went on a pretty good stretch there.
Yeah, so I'd say, I mean, it's just kind of funny going back and looking at all these historical examples. It just really depends on the case by case basis, and then also, it's just a slippery slope once you start changing things. Where to stop? It's really hard to tell from what we've kind of discovered.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right,
sure.
we pretty much killed it there. So, thanks for coming on and being with us this week. And that was episode number 5, I think. So hopefully we'll get Joe back here, Juan back on, and we'll see you guys back here either Tuesday or Thursday next week.
Awesome.
See you later.